We inherited our childhood home, then discovered a hidden family living next door. No strangers allowed, the will said. Turns out, we were the strangers all along. When our parents passed away, my brother Sam and I weren't expecting anything major. They weren't the type to talk about inheritance or money or even the future. But there it was, a thick, cream-colored envelope tucked in the drawer of Dad's desk, sealed with the lawyer's name scrawled across it. We found it the day after the funeral, while sorting through their things. Sam had opened it first, eyes skimming quickly until they widened, and he handed it to me without a word. Inside was the deed to our old family home in Norfolk, the one we'd only visited during childhood summers. The house had belonged to our grandparents before our parents took it over, and it sat quiet and mostly forgotten for years, until now. What caught us off guard wasn't just the inheritance itself, but the strange handwritten note attached to the documents. Just 6 words, written in our mother's tight script, "No strangers allowed." This is important. It felt more like a warning than a wish. At first, we laughed it off. Our parents were quirky, Mom with her crossword puzzles and odd rules, Dad with his obsession over routines. This seemed like one of their final eccentricities. Still, the phrase lingered in my mind. Sam joked that maybe it was about Airbnb. They probably didn't want us turning it into a bloody rental, he said, chuckling. But there was something about it that didn't sit right. We decided to visit the house the following weekend to check things out. It had been over a decade since either of us had been there. The place was mostly intact, dusty but not decayed. The gardens had grown wild and tangled, ivy creeping up the sides like long-forgotten hands reaching for attention. But what struck us first was the door. The front door had a new lock. Not something my parents would have added, this was modern, a keypad-style entry that definitely hadn't been there before. There were also cameras, one facing the driveway and another on the back garden, barely concealed by the vines. Sam and I exchanged looks, both feeling suddenly out of place in what was supposed to be our childhood sanctuary. We didn't know the passcode, so Sam had to crawl in through the back window, like we were burglars in our own home. Inside, everything was still and heavy. Not just with dust, but with memories. The faded floral wallpaper, the same brown plaid armchairs, the same creaky floorboard right at the entrance of the dining room. It was all exactly as we remembered, and yet something felt wrong. There were dishes in the sink. Not dusty, old ones, fresh ones. A clean coffee cup with a lipstick mark. A half-eaten apple on the counter, only slightly browned. We hadn't told anyone we were coming. Nobody should have been there. We called the police, assuming someone had been squatting. They sent a local constable over, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who recognized our family name immediately. He didn't seem surprised to hear about the unlocked window or the fresh food. In fact, he looked almost awkward. "You didn't know, then?" he asked gently, looking between Sam and me. "Know what?" I asked, already feeling a chill creeping up my spine. "About the people next door," he said. "They've been living here a while. Your father, well, he visited them often." Sam narrowed his eyes. "What people?" "That place has been empty for years." The constable hesitated, then gave us a look that said we weren't going to like what came next. "There's a woman named Elise. She lives in the cottage next to yours. And she has 2 kids. Teenagers. Your father helped set them up there." I remember my stomach twisting. I thought of the cameras, the new locks, the note. No strangers allowed. Was Elise the stranger? Or were we? We decided not to leave. Not until we figured out what the hell was going on. That night, I stayed in my old bedroom and Sam took the guest room. Around midnight, I heard a knock at the door. Not the front door, the one that connected the house to the garden path leading toward the cottage. I crept downstairs, heart pounding, and opened it slowly. A woman stood there. Mid-40s, blonde hair tied back, wearing a long cardigan and holding a tin of what looked like cookies. She smiled nervously. You must be Claire, she said. I'm Elise. I nodded, stepping aside, though I had no idea why I let her in. There was something familiar in her face, something almost maternal. She looked around the room like she knew it. Your dad used to sit in that chair, she said softly, gesturing to Dad's old recliner. Every Thursday. My throat felt dry. What were you to him? I asked, more bluntly than I intended. Elise looked down at her hands, then back up. His partner, she said. For almost 16 years. I sat down hard, the word echoing in my ears. Sam joined us moments later, confused by the voices. Elise didn't flinch. She repeated what she told me. That she had met our father nearly 2 decades ago. That while he never officially left our mum, he spent every other week at the cottage, and helped raise her 2 children, children who, we learned with a jolt, were not from a previous marriage. They were his. Our father had a second family. A life he had kept entirely hidden from us. And our mother had known. Elise showed us photos. Birth certificates. Even handwritten letters from our dad, full of affection, signed, Love, H. My dad's name was Harold. I could recognize the scrawl anywhere. Sam didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at the floor, fists clenched. I was reeling too. Not just because of the betrayal, but because of the way Elise spoke of him with love, with grief. She had lost him too, and the way she looked at me. It wasn't hostile. It was cautious, yes, but there was care there, like she saw a piece of him in me. It messed with my head. Everything we thought we knew about our parents, about our lives, was being rewritten in real time. Elise didn't ask us to leave. She didn't beg for her children's inheritance. She said she had her own house now, nearby, and the cottage was only temporary. But she did ask one thing: don't kick them out. Please. Let them stay a little longer until we figure things out. That night, Sam and I sat on the porch and didn't speak for an hour. When we finally did, it was to ask each other one question: what now? Update 2. We didn't sleep much that night. The air inside the house felt too heavy, too charged with confusion and betrayal. I kept waking up thinking I'd dreamt the whole thing, only to glance at the hall and remember Elise's voice, her face, her children. My half-siblings. I hadn't even asked their names. The next morning, Sam made coffee while I sat on the kitchen stool, staring at nothing. We need to talk to them, he finally said. The kids. They deserve to know we're not going to throw them out. I nodded slowly. I didn't know how I felt about any of it, but I knew they were innocent. Our dad might have had a double life, but his kids hadn't asked for it. We found them in the garden behind the cottage, tossing a football back and forth in the long grass. The boy was tall, lean, with the same brown eyes as our dad. The girl looked younger, maybe 13, wearing a sweatshirt far too big for her. They both froze when they saw us approaching. Elise stepped out from the porch with a worried look, but Sam raised his hand gently. It's okay, he said. We just want to talk. We introduced ourselves. I expected tension, defensiveness, maybe even anger. But instead, the boy, Daniel, just gave us a long look and said, I always wondered if you knew about us. His sister, Emma, stayed close to her mum, watching silently. Elise led us into the cottage, which was smaller but warm, filled with books and plants and framed pictures of a life we'd never seen. There were photos of our dad too. Him with the kids, building a treehouse, helping Emma with a science fair project, smiling at Elise in a candid shot in the kitchen. It hurt to look at them. Sam stiffened beside me. He couldn't take his eyes off one particular photo, our dad holding a birthday cake with Daniel 10 in bright blue icing. That was the year Dad missed my graduation. He'd said he was on a work trip. It made sense now. Or rather, it made no sense at all. Elise noticed. I didn't know he missed something for you, she said quietly. He never told me. I'm so sorry. That stung more than I expected. Not her words, her sincerity. She wasn't trying to guilt us. She just genuinely looked hurt to learn that he'd been hurting us too. Later that evening, Sam took a long walk alone while I stayed behind with Elise. She made tea, the way Mum used to, with a splash of milk and no sugar. It was unsettling how similar some of their habits were. He loved you, she said softly as she handed me the mug. He talked about you and Sam all the time. He hated himself for lying, but he didn't know how to leave either life behind. So he kept both, I said bitterly. And none of us really had him. Elise looked down at her hands. I know. That night, I wandered through the old house, stopping in the study where Dad used to read. The books were still in order, the globe on his desk still turned to Europe. I pulled open a drawer on impulse and found a stack of notebooks. His handwriting. Journal entries. Some pages were torn out, but what remained was enough to paint a clearer picture. He hadn't planned to start a second family. He'd met Elise through work, they'd connected over grief, she'd lost her brother, and Dad had just buried his mother. One thing led to another, and suddenly it was 10 years later, and he was living two lives. In one entry, he wrote, I wish I could tell Claire and Sam. But I've already failed them too deeply. If they hate me after I'm gone, I'll deserve it. I didn't show Sam the journal entries right away. I wasn't sure he wanted to see them. But I kept reading. Over the next 2 days, we stayed in the house, trying to decide what to do. The will had no mention of Elise or her children. Everything was left to Sam and me, with that one line, no strangers allowed. It wasn't until the third night that I realized what Mum had meant. It wasn't about random people or renters. It was about them. Elise. Daniel. Emma. To her, they were strangers. Unwelcome ones. That crushed me in a different way. Mum had known. She'd lived with that knowledge for years. I thought about all the times she'd been distant with Dad, the quiet dinners, the strained holidays. I used to think it was just marriage fatigue. Now I wondered if every silence had been soaked in betrayal. Sam returned late that night, smelling of beer and cold air. He dropped onto the couch beside me, eyes bloodshot. I don't want to hate him, he said. But I kind of do. I didn't answer. I felt the same way. What do we do about them? He asked finally. They're family, I said before I could stop myself. They didn't choose any of this. Neither did we. The next morning, we told Elise we weren't selling the house, not yet. We wanted time. Time to think, time to process, time to understand the world we'd stepped into. Elise looked relieved but cautious. Thank you, she said, voice thick. I'll start looking for a new place. We never meant to stay here long. It was where he was. I nodded, unable to look at her. Everything was so tangled now. The man I'd admired, the man I'd missed terribly since his funeral, was also someone I didn't know. Someone who had smiled at another set of children with the same warmth he once gave us. Sam, to my surprise, said, You don't have to rush. Stay as long as you need. Elise blinked rapidly, clearly touched. Daniel nodded silently, his jaw clenched like Sam's used to when he was trying not to cry. Emma just gave a shy wave before retreating into her room. That day, Sam and I finally went into town. We bought groceries, got the locks changed, and stopped by the lawyer's office. We asked about amending the will, or if anything could be done to include Daniel and Emma in the estate, even unofficially. The lawyer gave us a look that was both skeptical and impressed. You don't have to do anything, he said. But it's rare to see heirs trying to share what's legally theirs. We left the office in silence. On the way back, we passed the cemetery. Without saying a word, we both turned in. Our parents were buried side by side, the headstones still fresh with flowers. I stared at them for a long time. What do you think she meant, really? Sam asked. Mom. With the note. I shook my head. I think it was a warning. But also, maybe she hoped we'd be better than they were. Sam didn't respond, but he reached out and squeezed my shoulder. Back at the house, I watched the sun set through the kitchen window. Daniel was helping Emma with homework at the garden table. Elise was watering plants. Sam was flipping through a photo album on the porch. And me? I stood in the middle of a house built on secrets, trying to build something better with the truth. Update 3. Over the next week, everything began to shift, not in some dramatic, movie-style transformation, but in the small, quiet ways that life tends to change when people choose to stay instead of walk away. Elise and the kids continued living in the guest cottage, but the tension between us slowly began to dissolve. Sam, surprisingly, was the first to really crack through the walls between our families. He started helping Daniel fix up an old bicycle they found in the garage, and every afternoon I'd see them hunched over it with grease-stained fingers and identical furrowed brows. I caught myself watching them more than once, struck by how easy it looked, how two strangers with a shared bloodline could start to look like brothers. Emma, meanwhile, had warmed up to me in an unexpected way. I found her sitting in the sunroom one morning, sketching in a notebook. She tried to hide it when she saw me, but I asked if I could take a look. What I found stunned me. Pages filled with pencil drawings of the house, the garden, the trees, even me and Sam, always from a distance, always with eyes just slightly too large, as if she was still trying to make sense of us. I started leaving sketch pads and colored pencils on the kitchen table. She never thanked me directly, but I noticed she stopped hiding her work. That felt like enough. Elise stayed cautious but open. We had long conversations over tea in the evenings, mostly about Dad. We compared timelines, tried to piece together how he managed the impossible, living two lives, two routines, two versions of himself. He always seemed tired, she said once. Now I know why. One night, she asked if I ever felt like we were betraying our mom by allowing this to happen, by letting them stay, by not being angry enough. I didn't know how to answer her. I'd been asking myself the same question for days. There was a part of me that still felt loyal to Mum's pain, that old bitterness like a splinter buried deep. But there was another part of me, louder now, that felt like clinging to her hurt would only continue a legacy of silence and secrecy. I didn't want to be another generation of that. I wanted something else. Then came the letter. Sam found it tucked behind a loose panel in the master bedroom closet. It was in Mum's handwriting, sealed in an envelope addressed to both of us. We opened it together at the kitchen table, hands shaking. Inside, it said. To Claire and Sam. If you're reading this, then we're gone, and the truth has finally crawled its way out. I'm sorry. I wanted to spare you from this ugly, complicated truth about your father and me. I knew about Elise for years. I knew about the children. I hated it. I hated her, for existing, hated him, for creating this mess, and hated myself for not leaving. But I also loved him. And I stayed. Maybe that makes me weak. Or maybe it just makes me human. The house. The condition in the will wasn't meant to punish. It was meant to protect. This house has seen lies, yes, but it also saw your first steps, your birthdays, the nights we laughed until the lights flickered. I didn't want strangers living here. Not renters. Not outsiders who wouldn't know what this place meant. But maybe, now that you know, Elise and her children aren't strangers anymore. That's up to you. Do better than we did. Love without secrets. Mom. Sam was quiet for a long time after reading it. Then he just said, she knew. All this time. And I nodded. Yeah. And maybe she wanted us to forgive. We didn't decide anything that night. We just sat in the quiet, letting the letter rest between us like a fragile piece of glass. But things changed after that. Sam started inviting Daniel to dinner inside the main house. I started helping Emma with her school projects. Elise cooked a Sunday meal for all of us, and it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like healing. One evening, I caught myself laughing with her over a burnt casserole, and it hit me how far we'd come from that first night of suspicion and tension. We were, somehow, becoming something like a family. Of course, not everything was easy. One morning, I overheard Emma telling her friend on the phone that she hated this house, that it felt like a place where everyone was pretending to get along, but nobody really meant it. It stung, but I got it. She was young, displaced, forced into this awkward merger she never asked for. Later that day, I left a note on her sketchpad: "You don't have to pretend. You just have to be honest. That's enough." The next morning, she left a new drawing on the counter: the house, with 2 front doors and 2 families stepping out, merging into one. I teared up in the kitchen. Sam found me like that and just said, "We're doing okay, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "We really are." That spring, we hosted a neighborhood gathering. It was Elisa's idea, and I wasn't sure how it would go, but to my surprise, people came. Old neighbors, distant relatives, even a few people who'd known Elise before Dad passed. There was laughter, clinking glasses, kids running in the yard, and music from the old record player that still sat in the corner of the living room. For a while, it felt like a celebration, not a cover-up. And maybe that's what it needed to be. We weren't pretending the past hadn't happened. We were just choosing not to let it poison the future. We even began slowly updating the house. Sam took on the attic. I tackled the basement. Elise repainted the cottage. Emma helped redesign the old shed into an art studio. Daniel built raised beds for a garden. Piece by piece, we weren't just maintaining our parents' legacy, we were rewriting it. Not erasing them, but learning how to live with all the pieces of who they were. Even the parts that hurt. Even the parts we couldn't understand. Sometimes love means choosing to stay, to fix what you didn't break. And sometimes it means opening the door to people you once called strangers. Only to realize they've been family all along. Update 4. I don't know how I made it through that first night after the confrontation. It was like some invisible veil had been lifted, and now I could see the house, the land, the hallway photos, even the dust patterns on the old furniture, in an entirely different light. I felt like I was living inside a shell of a lie that had been hollowed out over decades. I kept thinking about Mom, how she looked me in the eyes at the hospital before she passed, holding my hand, telling me to take care of everything, without ever once hinting that everything included the unraveling of 2 lives, mine and Ben's. The morning after the confrontation, Ben had already packed a duffel bag and was sitting on the front steps, silently sipping coffee when I came down. He didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. But then he stood up, handed me the spare keys to his truck, and said he was going to stay at a friend's place until we both figured out what the hell to do with this twisted mess we'd inherited. Not just the house, he added, but this legacy. He sounded exhausted, but not angry. I wasn't either. We were both just gutted. Numb. Like the floor had dropped out from under us, and we were too tired to even fall properly. He didn't ask me to come with him, and I didn't offer to stop him. There was this mutual understanding that we needed time apart to process it all, or we might say something we couldn't take back. Over the next few days, I buried myself in the attic and basement, going through boxes, flipping through yearbooks, scanning through letters, bills, and photo albums. I was trying to piece together the timeline. When had it started? How had they kept this secret for so long? I found receipts, so many damn receipts, in envelopes with labels like school tuition, Karen, and rent, Violet Saint. I found letters in Dad's handwriting addressed to Monica, which I now knew was Ava's mom. They weren't romantic. They were functional. Updates on the kids. Money transfers. Discussions about doctor appointments, school behavior, vacations. It was like he was parenting in parallel. And here's the wildest part, it seemed like Ava and her brother didn't know. Not really. I had assumed they were in on it, but the more I dug, the more it became obvious that they were being strung along just like we were. Dad had done some weird mental gymnastics to keep it all afloat, carefully coordinated visits, a perfectly balanced dual life. One day for us, one day for them. Alternating weekends. He had built out excuses for every holiday. Work trips. Extended hospital shifts. Emergency meetings. And because we believed in him, we never questioned it. Why would we? He was the good parent. Always dependable. Always calm. But looking back, the signs were all there. The frantic calls from patients. The fact that he never brought his phone into the house when he got home. The business trips that didn't require luggage. A week after Ben left, I got a call from Ava. She asked if I could come next door. I hesitated, but something in her voice was different, calmer, less defensive. I walked over, heart pounding, half expecting another ambush. But when she opened the door, she looked broken. Not angry. Not smug. Just drained. She led me to their living room, where a manila envelope was sitting on the coffee table. Mom left this in the kitchen drawer, she said quietly. I don't think she wanted me to find it. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of signed agreements, guardianship forms, life insurance beneficiary updates, and a handwritten note from Dad to Monica. The note was dated 4 months before his death. It was apologetic. Rambling. Saying he didn't want to keep lying, but he didn't know how to stop without destroying everyone. He was caught between 2 families he loved. I always thought I could fix this one day, he wrote. But I kept running out of days. I had to sit down. I think I stayed in that chair for 20 minutes, just rereading the note over and over. Ava sat silently across from me, watching. Finally, she spoke. I didn't know, not really. I thought something was off, but I never thought we were his second family. I thought maybe you were. That hit me harder than I expected. Because for the first time, I realized we had both been competing in a race where the finish line didn't exist. We weren't rivals. We were pawns. Later that night, I drove out to the old town cemetery where both our parents were buried, side by side, no less. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood in front of their graves and felt absolutely nothing at first. Then rage. Then sadness. Then exhaustion again. I didn't come for closure. I didn't say anything profound. I just stood there, breathing in the silence, letting the weight of it all press down on me until I couldn't take it anymore. When I got home, I finally sat down at the old desk in Dad's study and wrote Ben an email. I told him everything I'd found. Everything I'd read. Everything Ava had said. I didn't ask him to come back, and I didn't say we needed to figure this out. I just needed him to know the truth, the full picture, so we could decide what came next, together or apart. Update 5. Ben came back 2 days after I sent the email. He didn't knock, just walked in like he used to, carrying that same old duffel bag and a 6-pack of beer. He found me in the backyard, sitting under the dying oak tree we used to climb as kids. Without saying a word, he handed me a bottle, cracked one open for himself, and dropped into the lawn chair beside me. We sat there a long time, listening to the breeze rustle through the dry leaves. Finally, he said, "So what do we do now?" It wasn't angry or accusatory, just tired and honest. I didn't have a great answer. "I don't know," I said. "Sell the place, burn it down, rent it out, move next door, bulldoze both houses and plant a forest, take your pick." He chuckled, but it was hollow. "You think we'll ever forgive them?" I didn't answer immediately. I'd been thinking about that for days. Could I forgive people who lied so thoroughly, so masterfully, that they rewrote the definition of who I was? I don't know, I said again. But I don't think we need to decide that yet. Over the next few weeks, we started taking inventory of the house, not just physically, but emotionally. We had to decide what stayed, what went, and what would never be touched again. Some days we barely spoke. Other days we found ourselves telling childhood stories we hadn't thought about in years. The memories came flooding back, uninvited and unpredictable. The time Dad helped Ben build that stupid birdhouse. The time Mom covered for me when I crashed her car into a mailbox. The nights we camped in the backyard and pretended we were explorers. And every time a good memory surfaced, it was like salt in a wound. Because now we didn't know if those moments had been real, or just props in a carefully staged illusion. What made it worse was that some of the memories were good. Not everything had been fake. That's what twisted the knife. If they had been monsters, it would have been easier. But they weren't. They were kind, gentle, complicated people who made a series of impossible choices, and somewhere along the way, they forgot to be honest. Or maybe they convinced themselves they were being honest enough. At one point, Ava stopped by to drop off some documents, stuff her mom wanted to hand over, like tax forms, insurance policies, even a couple of old home movies that apparently featured both families. We invited her to sit for coffee. She looked around the kitchen like she was in a museum. I could tell it was jarring for her too. "This house," she said softly, "it's like a dream I was never allowed to live in." We didn't know what to say to that. I think she understood that we were all reeling. Her mom had moved in with her sister across town and was, according to Ava, spending a lot of time crying in the laundry room. None of this had gone the way anyone planned. No dramatic confrontations, no screaming matches, just a slow, sad unraveling. Ava and I talked more after that. Not a lot, but enough to realize that we had more in common than just shared betrayal. We were, in a bizarre way, siblings. Technically not by blood, but definitely by consequence. Ben and I didn't sell the house. Not yet. We decided to rent it out for a while, maybe even renovate it a bit. We packed up all the family heirlooms and put them in storage. Some of it we gave to charity. Some of it we kept. And some of it we burned, literally. One evening, we made a small bonfire in the backyard and fed it letters, photos, receipts, and objects that no longer belonged in our lives. It wasn't about erasing history. It was about reclaiming some control over it. In the middle of that night, I woke up and walked through the house, barefoot, touching the walls, the banisters, the old piano keys. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just existed in the silence of it all, letting the weight of legacy, lies, and lineage sit heavy in my chest. I didn't know who I was in this story anymore, victim, witness, or just a footnote in someone else's saga. Eventually, I started therapy. So did Ben. We didn't go together, but we talked about it sometimes. The therapist asked me once if I would ever consider meeting with Ava and her brother in a formal setting, to talk through everything. I told her I might. Not now. But someday. Because even though our parents had betrayed us, they'd also left behind a strange, misshapen family that none of us had asked for but all of us were stuck with. And maybe, if we were careful with each other, we could build something honest from the wreckage. Not a happy ending. But maybe a truer one. And in a story like this, maybe that was the best we could hope for. What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Like the video and hit the subscribe button for more Reddit stories.